Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. Whoops. The theme of today is Attribution, Google Ads, and Google Analytics. We have a great presentation prepared for you today. It typically takes about 45 minutes and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. We always start with our legal and confidential information. Long story short, every effort has been made to ensure that this information is accurate and up to date, and we ask that you do not copy or redistribute it. We have some course requirements, more like recommendations. One is that if you have two monitors, we would recommend setting them up so that you can view the presentation on one screen and your call tracking metrics account on the other. And we also recommend that you use either the latest version of Chrome or Firefox and have pop-ups enabled. We assume that you have an account with us. If you don't, great, we're happy to have you. You can head over to our plans page and get signed up in a matter of minutes. And if you are a current client of ours and are on our marketing or contact center plan, feel free to create a new sub-account for testing. Okay, we have a fantastic agenda for you today. We're going to be going through the ins and the outs of CTM and Google. So we're going to look at Google Analytics. We're going to look at specifically call events, goals, and conversions. We're going to look at our Google Ads integration, which is going to be focused on the call-only ads and the click-to-calls. So with that, I am going to pass you over to Cherie, who is going to be kicking us off today. So welcome, Cherie.
Thank you so much, Jessica. All right, so hello, everyone. I'm so excited about today's Google Analytics and Google Ads webinar. Let's get you started here. All right, we have just about 45 minutes, just like Jessica said, so let's get started by getting to know each other a little bit better. My name is Cherie Thomas, and I'm Tier 2 support here at Call Tracking Metrics, and I wanted to share 5 things about myself. The first thing is my favorite color is purple, if you haven't already guessed. I have 2 beautiful kids. I'm a huge football fan, Redskins fan. I love to travel and try different cuisines, and of course, I love my job. Now, I'll be quizzing you on those later, so I hope you paid attention. I'm proud to say I've been a member of the team here at Call Tracking Metrics for 2 years. I find Google as a great tool to use for marketers and strategy, so I'm hoping to drop some knowledge and spark some excitement in all of you today. But enough about me. Let's get to know a little bit about all of you and become more familiar with your GoToWebinar control panel. On your control panel, there's a hand icon. If you can hear me, please raise your hand. See some hands going up. Looks like everyone can hear me. If you can see my screen, please raise your hand. Some more hands going up. Great. All right, so we're in good shape. Everyone can both hear and see my screen. So next, there's a question box. Questions can be asked private between you and the organizers of this event. If you see the question box, tell me a little bit about you, where you're from, and your role in your company. Oh, okay. I see some people are from California. Got some West Coast visitors over here. I'm loving it. Great. I see some East Coast people too. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. So I want to do some polls. So let's move on to those. Right. So the first poll I want to share is Google regularly employs what? Is it dogs, bees, bears, goats, or vampires? Give y'all some time to answer that. Okay, so we got those polls in. Let's see the answers. Ah, it looks like everyone said it's bees, but it's actually goats. All right, let's try another one. What was, what was the first ever Google Doodle? Is it binary code for Google, a bouncing beach ball, a Burning Man stick figure, a sketch of Mount Rushmore, or a lava lamp? See some of those answers coming through. All right, let's see what everyone said. Haha. Looks like some of you been here before. It is correct, a Burning Man stick figure. All right. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Side those results. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the two types of paid Google calls. It's important to understand the difference between the two types of paid calls. Here's an example of a paid search result. Do you see the difference? Got some arrows pointing to those differences. All right, so if you said one has a link and one has a number, you're correct. Now that you've identified the two, let's dig a little bit deeper into what each of them mean and represent. So this example shows you can click on a paid ad and it will take you to the landing page of your site, which looks something like this and is known as a click to landing page. While this example shows you can click the phone number and it will prompt you to place a phone call and dial the number for you. This is known as a click to call. Basically, the major difference between the two types of paid calls is that for the first one, you click the paid ad, which allows you to hit the landing page of that site. From there, Google Analytics tracking script and call tracking metrics tracking code will be on the page and work as a team to track that session. While for the click to calls, the visitor doesn't come into contact with either CTM or Google Analytics tracking codes. So even though it could be argued that they are the same thing because both calls generate from a Google ad, the two are in fact completely separate. Because the click to calls do not interact with either tracking script, the click to calls are on offline tracking source and cannot share the tracking source of Google Ads. Because of this, we have two separate integrations. So just keep in mind that the click to landing page is going to equal our Google Analytics integration. The click to calls or ad extensions is going to equal our Google Ads integration. This can get confusing because we use Google Analytics integration to send call conversions into AdWords. While for the click to calls, we use the Google Ads integration. And this integration is possible by utilizing a double forward from Google's number to call tracking metrics number and by installing a script inside of Google Ads that communicates with CTM and thus fills that tracking gap. Confused? I know, it took me a while too. We'll be covering this topic in great detail in the following section, but let's do a quick recap. So just know that both are Google Ad calls with two separate integrations, and both types of calls will count as conversions in Google Ads. Here's a visual or video to simplify everything I just went over. All right, perfect. Now that we've defined our two types of paid calls, let's go over the integrations inside of CTM and features that are required for those integrations. All right, so here we will go over the tracking number, target number, the type, and the tracking source columns. We're going to go ahead and get started with the tracking sources. So displayed here, we can see tracking sources for Google Ads and ad extensions, and both our presets and our platform. For Google Ads, we are looking to track visitors coming from Google and send them to your website to present them with the tracking number you selected. But in order to do that, we're looking for a target number, which is displayed here in the target number column, which is the number from your website. Our tracking code is looking to swap for the tracking number when those visitors come to Google paid advertising channel. We call these on-site or dynamic numbers. Now, just looking right above that, you will notice that we are not looking for any target numbers for the ad extension source because we are not driving visitors to your website, but asking them to call directly from the ad. So we don't need a target number. This is also referred to as a static or an offsite source, which is defined here in your type columns. So this is another indication if things aren't going right. You can always look in this type column and say, okay, my source might be a little misconstrued, even if even if it says Google Ads here and it says offsite, you know that there's a problem and you need to go and fix it. So this is a good troubleshooting tool for you. The last thing I want to go over is the tracking number column. Just want to briefly say how important it is to add your description here. It's important because it will affect how your events show up under the description. And I believe Jessica will actually touch on that later on for everyone. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the tracking sources. Just going to search here by Google. Okay, so we're just looking for Google Ads. All right. So like mentioned earlier, this is a preset in our platform. We pre-fill the name and the description for you. And you can customize it, but why? Just let us do the work for you. Just simply select it from this column right here. And then we'll populate the information needed. For the source trigger, we simply place Google's paid click identifier, which is a unique receipt for paid clicks, or better known as GCLID or GCLID, to catch all of your paid clicks back to your website. And the GCLID actually shows up in your call logs session data landing URL as a tag when auto tagging is enabled in your Google Ads account. But don't worry about that either. We'll revisit these topics in the call log and show you how to enable auto tagging when we go over our Google Ads platform. Finally, I want to briefly touch on positions. So positions are found in the source settings. The main thing to remember is just to always remember to set the sources with the more specific tracking triggers at a lower position number so our system can be aware that we need to swap for them first. Essentially, you're just prioritizing them. The less specific sources like referral should always have a higher number. Right, so we're going to go back here and then we're going to look at our ad extension source. Okay, so the ad extension source is pretty straightforward. Like I said, it's still a preset, so we're going to populate the name and description. And you notice the big difference here is that triggers is not enabled. It's because, again, we're not tracking anything back to your website. It's a static source. So all we need here is the name, description, and then attach the tracking number. And that is it in a nutshell for tracking sources. Okay. So want to go ahead and move forward with the call log. And I know all of you are excited to see all of your hard work pay off. So here it is. Was it not? All right, so this is where we will look at attribution. I've already filtered my call log by all of the paid traffic, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to pay attention in the session data column. So basically, for session data, we are looking to see if we're going to provide you with 3 components. The first component is going to be the, if you just hover over it, it should say that it's going to be the landing URL, and that's basically where your visitors landed on your website, the referring URL where your visitors came from, and it should reflect back to Google, and in these cases, it does. And then the last part of it is the keywords. The keywords here are actually the search keywords. They're not the bidding keywords that you do in your Google platform. So just remember that. Now this link icon here is another way we can open up to what I like to refer to as the bread and butter. This is the visitor detail, which includes the advertising data, and the advertising data shows your campaign, your ad group, keyword, source, medium, and ad content. In the upper right, you'll see the UA code, which is the web property from the page the visitor landed on. And if I go back to that link I was just telling you about, that UA should actually match what this is. And this is just confirmation of where we're sending all that information into analytics. Speaking of analytics, let's go ahead and check and see what analytics will, the information that we send over. And this is just typically a mirror. So like I said, we're going to do the medium, action, category, label, and value. With all this great information, you can create these goals inside of your analytics platform to count as conversions. So just remember that, we send events, but you have to create the goal to make it your conversion to import over into Google Ads. And there's just one more thing I wanted to touch on before we move forward. If you notice that your events are not coming in, Google does not operate on real time. They are delayed. We have reports of events being delayed 2 to 20 minutes to 2 hours, or sometimes even 24 hours. So if you notice anything over 24 hours or not getting those events, call out support and we can help you troubleshoot. So now that I've spoken so much about events, I want to go ahead and launch a quick poll question and ask everyone who is familiar with events and analytics. So let's launch that. So you never heard of them, known of them, but never used them. You use them all the time, or you are a Google Events pro. Okay, got some responses here. Okay, so it looks like you never heard of them. Excellent. Jessica will help you get all accustomed to that. So go ahead and take over, Jessica.
Excellent. Thank you for that great overview of inside of call tracking metrics and of the 2 different types of paid calls, Sheree. That was fantastic. Let me see. I think I need the presenter role passed to me. Let me see if I can just grab it. It says I'm presenting, but I don't have the option. Just a second. All right, here we go. Back on track. Okay. So it looks like those who participated in the poll are not familiar with events. So no problem. That's what we're here today to discuss and become experts in. So what happens is call tracking metrics, after every form, text, and call is received, we send an event into analytics. An event is made up of 4 components. So those 4 components are going to be category, action, label, and value. So the category is typically something like calls. This can be customized. We'll be reviewing that shortly. The action is going to be equal to the tracking source. So if you have a tracking source of Google AdWords, direct website, and so on, that would be the action of the event. The label is going to be made up of 4 different parts. So it's going to be the tracking number label, which I'll actually show you how that works in just a moment. The tracking number itself, whether or not this was a first time or repeat caller, and then the unique call ID. And then up next we have the value, and the value is going to be the total talk time of the call. So in a typical case, the value is not measured in actual dollars, but it's measured in seconds. So here's some examples of what an event might look like in analytics. So here's one for a Google AdWords call. So the category is calls, the action is AdWords, the label would look something like that, and the value would be 180, which would mean that that call was 3 minutes long. So here's another example of what it might look like if you're doing call scoring, which again, I will show you in just a moment. In this case, it's going to go in under the category of call sale. The action was Facebook, which means the source was Facebook, and it's marked with the value of $1,000. Now, this does happen with one of the toggles. So this is going in as a sale. So this value actually comes from the call log. Okay. So that's some different ways that events might report inside of analytics. So here is a quick video, which is going to go over the nitty gritty of where those events report inside of Google Analytics. So let's take a look at that. Oop, looked like I was muted. Yeah, so now we're all experts with Google Events, right? All right, so now here we are at our integration page. Now, like Cherie said earlier, we do have two different integrations for the two different types of calls. So the first one we're going to explore is Google Analytics. So I will go ahead and click in. Now, the first thing we're going to notice is that we're already connected. So let's go ahead and disconnect so you see a fresh view. Here we go. So if you haven't connected before, it's going to look like this, pretty much an empty shell. So let's go ahead and click Connect to Google. It's going to ask you what user you want to connect. Now, when doing this, you want to make sure that the user you're selecting is the user that has access to the analytics property. So you're going to want to make sure that's the same person to get the same rights. So we're going to say allow, and it'll just take a second. So here it's going to show me all the different web properties that I have access to. Now I have access to a whole bunch of them, so I'm just going to use our search here to find the one that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go to this one and say use profile. So now at this point, we know that we are connected. We know this because it's going to tell us the name of the property we're connected to. It's going to give us the UAA code for that property, as well as it's going to tell us the user email address that's connecting the two. All right. So when you first connect, by default, the first two toggles are going to be enabled. The first one is simply giving us access to send events into analytics. And the second one is allowing us to do that for offline sources. So a situation where you might not want this enabled is if you're doing like a Super Bowl commercial, because that's technically an offline source. That should potentially drive a lot of call volume, which would then be sending a lot of events into analytics, and maybe you want your offline data separated from your online analytics. So that's a use case for that. There's no right or wrong answer. It's really whatever your business is trying to achieve. Okay, so then we have our third toggle here, which is to send conversion events. Now, if you remember back to when we were talking about a call sale and it had the actual value, this is what's going to enable that. So let's jump back into this tab. And here you can see we have some scored calls. So we know that this one had an event set for $99. So if we actually open this up and say check analytics, it's going to show us all the events we've sent. So here's our regular event, and the value is 17. So that means that this call was 17 seconds long. And then we can see we sent another event and it had a value of 99, and that this one is a call sale. So this is how we can tell the difference between a lead and a sale, and it's attributing actual value. So it's a great way in analytics to measure leads for sales and get real revenue data. So that's a pretty powerful tool that we have built into our system and available in all plans. Okay. We do have this little option here if you have this enabled. I like to call this the too many cooks in the kitchen toggle or checkbox. So what has happened in the past is we've had too many cooks in the kitchen, and they're all scoring the call. Maybe the first person marked it for $100 and somebody's like, nope, that was actually a $50 sale. So they update it. And then somebody's like, oh, they actually upgraded and now it's a $200 sale. Well, in that case, we had just sent, I think, $350 worth of events into analytics. So what happens is it's going to stack rather than consolidate. So this would ensure that we only send one event to kind of prevent the inflation that can take place. So that option's there for you if you need it. Okay, for this one, we do have another video that I'm going to show, but first let's talk about this option. So this one allows us to categorize the activity or the event by activity. So this is a little bit of like a history and evolution of call tracking metrics. We started out as just call attribution, and over the years we have expanded. So now we can do forms, we can do text messages. So this will actually categorize the event by activity type. So rather than them all going in as calls, a call will go in as inbound call, a message will go as inbound message, and a form will go in under form. So I actually highly recommend using this one. I'm a data clean freak, I guess. I like my data very clean and easy to understand, and this really helps achieve that. So if you are on our marketing plan or contact center plan, you can utilize this feature here. If you're not, you probably don't see it. So that might be confusing, and I apologize. So what this does is it will automatically associate cost data from analytics to each activity. So what does that mean? So what that means is if you're doing Google Ads and somebody clicks your ad and places a phone call, we'll be able to pull out of analytics the actual cost for that call, or the cost toward the click that led to the call. So that's pretty cool for ROI reports to be able to see, all right, we spent $5 on this click. How much revenue did it actually bring in? So that is what this one does. Pretty cool. And then if we jump to the bottom here, we have a few resources for you that are pretty handy. One is Check Analytics. So this is just going to make sure that everything is set up between our analytics and AdWords. And we can check AdWords to make sure that we have auto tagging enabled and we detect an AdWords account connected. So it looks like we're in good shape. If you're seeing that your data is reporting a little spotty inside of analytics, this is usually a good place to come check out. So before I move any further, let's check out that video, which is going to explain the fourth toggle, which will be this guy right here. So let's watch the video. That was a little rundown of the fourth toggle. So one of the things that I like to throw in with that too is a little, I guess, advice. This is a really powerful tool, but it does separate your data out into multiple places. So if you're sending your events into probably more than 3 or 4 different analytics properties, I would highly recommend that you upgrade to our marketing plan or start to utilize sub-accounts so that can be more of a one-on-one, a one-to-one reporting. Because when there's troubleshooting or something's not reporting properly and you're spreading your events all over the place, it's very hard to determine where the errors taking place. So while this is a very handy tool, it's like a fine spice. You should use it sparingly. So that is the fourth toggle. So with that, we're going to do some of the most common errors made on this integration, and then we will actually get into analytics to take a look at all of this. Okay, so here we have the common mistakes made within the Google Analytics integration. And if you've done these, I'd say raise your hand. I've done them 1,000 times, so it's common. Don't feel bad. So one of the most common mistakes is hard coding the tracking number on the landing page. What does that mean? That's when you're actually putting the tracking number on the page without dynamically swapping it, which really goes hand in hand with the second one, which is not installing the call tracking metrics script. If the script isn't on the page, we're not tracking it. So we won't have any session data, therefore we won't have any campaign data, and sadly no conversions inside of Google Ads. The next one is no Google Analytics tracking. So if Google Analytics isn't tracking the page, then when we ping them to see if they have any more data, they're going to report back nothing because they don't have any evidence of it taking place. So the next one is filters inside of analytics. I like to use this example a lot. I had a client who had many filters inside of their analytics, which is totally normal, by the way. And they had accidentally set up a filter to filter out all the traffic from North Carolina, and they were based inside of North Carolina. So I think they had meant to filter out their office IP, but instead they filtered out the entire state. So any calls that they had coming in from North Carolina did not display in that view. So filters can prevent our events from appearing based on how they're configured. The next one is if CTM and analytics aren't fully integrated. I've seen this all the time. You actually have to select to use this property and make sure that the first toggle is enabled, or else we're not going to be sending anything. Let's see, analytics and Adwords aren't connected. This is another common one. Those two need to be communicating in order for us to get the campaign data. So it's kind of neat and easy is that you can link analytics to AdWords inside of analytics, and you can link AdWords to analytics inside of AdWords. So there's two ways you can do it. You can do it both or one or the other, and it will work. The last one is if you haven't created any goals inside of Google Analytics. So events are an activity that takes place on the page. Typical analytics tracking is by the change from URL to URL. Now, to get these calls into Google Ads as conversions, we have to create goals around them. So if you don't have any goals created, you're not going to be seeing conversions inside of Google Ads. So those are the most common mistakes. So let's go inside of ads and check out how to set it up right. Here we go. Okay, so here we are inside of analytics. This is our test account. Like I've said before, we send our events, or we send our calls, forms, and text into analytics as events. They can be found under behavior, and then we have event. We go to event overview. So this is going to be showing us the highest level. So here we can see we have this is an overview of our events. So we have our calls. We had 70 of those. We have call sales, inbound calls, forms, and inbound messages. And this all one is some other event. So not all the events you see are actually from us. I've seen confusion around that before. Okay, so if I wanted to take a look at any one grouping of these, I could simply click in. So I'm going to look at inbound calls. And this is going to give me, again, another really high level overview. So for my time frame, which is actually pretty large because this is a sample account, it's going to tell me that I had 21 calls during this time frame. And of those 21 calls, they had a total value of 659. So that's going to be total seconds of talk time and an average talk time of 31 seconds. Now, again, this is a test account. If you're looking at your account, I imagine your averages will be a lot higher. Okay, so I can dive down or drive down a little deeper by going to event action. So that's going to separate these 21 calls by tracking source, because remember, the action is equal to the source. So this is a direct reflection of how many calls you had to each of these sources. So 21 calls, 7 of them were to Google AdWords, 4 to Twitter, 4 to website, and so forth. So it's just breaking it down a little bit more so we can actually see that our AdWords calls had a total value of 85 seconds, which again, in this case, is seconds of talk time and an average seconds of talk time of 12 seconds. So if I wanted to get into some more granular information, I can click just into that source, and it's going to bring me to the label. And again, the label is made up of 4 parts. The first one is going to be the label of the tracking number itself. So let's actually jump back over here. So here we have some of our sources. So we've actually changed it to Google Ads in the platform, but it's simply reflecting that this is the label of the number and this is the tracking number. So if we come over here, this is the label of the number and this is the tracking number. Up next, it's going to tell us whether or not this was a first-time caller or a repeat caller. And this is going to be the unique call ID inside of the call log. And then again, you're going to have all the breakdowns of this call. It was, you know, these 7 calls all were this many seconds long with an average of this many seconds. Okay. So that's really events in a nutshell, but there's a lot of data packed into them. So if we wanted to see more of the nitty gritty, we could add a secondary dimension and look at something like the source and medium. So in this case, we're going to hope to see something like Google and CPC. If we're seeing direct none, we probably had maybe an error in the setup. I can look at this another way if I want to see the keyword. So this should be for Coco Loco, so it'll be chocolate themed. We have organic chocolate truffles, yum. Chocolate with truffles, all this sounds good. So these are going to be the keywords that we were actually bidding on. If we see the star here, what that means is that this was a shopping campaign. Shopping campaigns don't match by keyword bidding, they match by description. So that's just letting us know that this was a shopping campaign. Okay. So now that we have our calls coming in, we can see we have our campaign data attributed to them. Now we want these to be conversions in AdWords, right? So let's go ahead and configure that. So to do that, we're going to create a goal. So an event is really almost as simply as it sounds. It's an event in time. So what we get to do is qualify when these events are actually meaningful to our businesses. So Google A/B tests this. So about half the time I see this template and half the time I don't. So if you don't see it, don't worry. It's totally normal and we're just going to hit custom anyways. So continue. So the first thing it's going to ask you to do is name your goal. I'm going to say CTM and I'm going to put today's date, which I believe is the 6th, hopefully, so that I can easily find it. And then next we need to select our goal type. Hopefully we all know that it's an event. And we hit continue. So now these terms should look pretty familiar. We have category, action, label, and value. So this is where we can qualify our calls to be goals. So one of the things you want to make sure to double check is when you're creating this, how did you configure it in the integration page? If you have this toggle enabled right here, calls will go in as inbound calls. If you have this disabled, everything will go in under calls. So it is important to make sure that you know which one you're specifying for when you're creating it. I'm going to go with calls. So this right here is actually all I need to create a goal. This would make it so that every inbound call, no matter what, would count as a goal completion. But what's nice is that I have the ability to fine tune what I want to qualify as a goal completion and conversion. So I could make this specifically for my Google Ads sources. And again, this is data matching. So in this case, you want to make sure that it exactly matches the data you're sending in. So if you're doing Google Ads, over Adwords, if you're updated, it should go in like this. If we wanted to get even more granular, we could add a label to it. Since the label is made up of 4 parts, it can't be equals to, it has to be regular expression, which is just telling it, make this one part unique. So this would be first dash call. So now with this goal, we have calls that came in under the source of Google Ads that are a first-time caller. Now that's what we're using to qualify as a conversion, which is good. We have some good fine-tuning here, but really where I think the value comes is with the value, because that is seconds of talk time. And what's important to take into consideration is the fact that we send every call, text, and form into analytics as an event. There's no qualifying for that. So if it was a wrong number or a voicemail or any circumstance where it's not like a quality lead, we're still sending those into analytics. So I think this is one of the best tools for qualifying your leads, is adding a time restraint. So in this case, I'm going to say this call has to be over 3 minutes long. So if you think it's a wrong number, they're probably off the line by 3 minutes. If they're leaving a voicemail, hopefully they're not leaving you long voicemails. I've seen companies go as large as 600 for these, so that if the call has to be over 10 minutes for it to count as a conversion. So that I think was like a cruise company, and their sales process is obviously a lot longer. So the shorter ones, they don't want to count as conversions. So in this case, we now have a goal created for calls to the Google AdWords source. That's a first time call that was greater than 10 minutes. Everyone with me? All right, so that is creating a goal, and I'm going to hit save. So our goal is created, and that's super exciting. We're almost there. So our next piece is to actually import that goal into Google Ads. So here we are in the new platform. So if we go to Tools Conversions, our next step is to import that goal. So this is where you have to have Google Analytics connected to Google Ads in one or both ways. So to do that, we're going to hit New Goal, and then we're going to go to Import Goal. And then we're going to select Analytics and Continue. And it's going to list all of the goals we have created. That's why I date them, so I know that this is the one that I just created for today, and hit Import, and boom, we are good. So now we have the full cycle as the calls come into that source and are completed. We're sending those events into analytics. So then analytics is going to look at that event and say, did that meet my goals requirements? If it meets that goals requirements, then analytics is going to send it to ads to count as a conversion. So we have our full flow of data passing between the 3 systems. So that is the Google Analytics bit of this. I'm going to now pass this over to Cherie, who's going to take us through the Google Ads part, which will be for click-to-calls and ad extensions. So with that, here's Cherie again.
Hello again, everyone. Thank you so much, Jessica. That was such an awesome job. Let me just grab my presenter role here and we can get started. Okay, thank you. All right, so like Jessica said, we're going to focus on the Google Ads integration. With this integration, just remember the end goal here is to track click to call and call extensions and count them all as conversions. Go ahead and get started. Okay, so unlike Jessica, I'm not going to unlink and relink. I love Google, but they get a little buggy sometimes. So I just want to go ahead and move forward with everything. So most of this integration will be completed in your Google Ads account, but first let's take care of these 3 steps inside of CTM. So the first step is enabling the integration. We are looking for you to associate the tracking source you assign to the tracking number or call extension, and it must be an offline source. It'll populate here, and it will only populate offline sources. It won't populate anything that's considered dynamic. Um, the next step is this toggle for delay Google Analytics events. Every hour, Google Ads will request call data from the tracking source and respond back with a possible keyword, ad campaign, and ad group. And because of that, we need to make sure that the delay Google Analytics events toggle is enabled so we can be sure and so we can ensure that all the data is retrieved from Google Ads is available. Basically, the 3 systems will all be reporting on the same data. And again, because I didn't unlink, but for all you newcomers, there will be an option that says activate call extensions. Clicking that button will be the option to populate the script that you see right here. And with that, you just simply copy it and paste it into your Google Ads account. So those are the 3 things that you would do inside of CTM. The rest of them, the integration steps are essentially spelled out for you here. I'm going to go ahead and go over to our Google Ads platform and do things a little differently. But either way, the end goal will be you'll have your Google Ads integration enabled. All right, so let's go ahead over here to Coco Loco, a little test account. All right, so to get to the scripts that we just copied, you can go to the tools and then go to scripts. But there's a little shortcut you can take by just pressing the G and the T, and then you can just type in scripts. So that's a little nice little trick there. So basically, you would go here and copy that script. You'll see it here, and then you would authorize it and then save it. Let's go back to scripts. And then the next thing you will have to do is do a frequency to run it and choose it to run as hourly. So we need to run it as hourly because there's no JavaScript and we need Google to search to apply the data. So this is why we choose the smallest amount of time offered. Now, go to extensions. Okay. So here, I already have my number, and to do the rest of the steps to enable this integration, basically we have to update it with the phone number, enable call reporting, and this step is basically allowing Google to provide their forwarding number so it can forward back to our tracking number to create the double forward and get you all 3 of those components I mentioned, the ad group, the campaign, and the keyword. The last thing is that you want to count all of your calls as conversions. Typically, in the past, before Google became even greater than what they are, you used to you used to have to select it to count as a conversion. It used to say none. But now it's defaulted to use and count everything as conversions for calls from ads. So you don't have to worry about enabling it, it'll already be there. Okay, so in the same section, Over all the way to the right, you should see something called clicks. I want to discuss clicks because it can be confusing to the eye. The number of clicks you see here doesn't really mean how many phone calls you got, but it actually means how many times that extension was visible when the ad was clicked. So do not get discouraged if your numbers do not match in CTM versus your Google ads. If you want to see what Google is actually tracking, since that determines if it will be a conversion or not, you can verify it by going to the predefined reports, and I can take you there. So you would get there by going to reports, predefined reports, extensions, and then call details. Takes a little while. Okay, awesome. So essentially, if you see it here, then it means it should be your CTM call log with the 3 components of data. And that's right here, like I mentioned earlier, gives you that campaign, that ad group, and then the keyword. If you don't see it here, then Google was not tracking the call, but you would still see it in the call log for CTM without those 3 components I just mentioned. This will also throw off the total calls versus our system and Google Ads. But please always come here to confirm if Google was tracking or providing their forwarding number. Our last 2 things I like to go over is auto tagging, which is needed so Google can tag the URL with their Google receipt or the GCL ID. When visitors click the ad on the link and land on your site, to enable it, please go to the settings menu. Let's do a little backtracking here. So it'll be in this little sub menu here, and then you would click on settings, and then you would click account settings, and then you should see auto tagging, and then you would enable it. It's essential and very important. Again, it's needed so Google can tag all those paid calls with their receipt to identify it was a paid click. Lastly, linking the Search Console with your Google Ads account. We do this because some customer ads get disapproved due to Google sending their bots to your site to crawl looking for those numbers, which are actually not going to be there. So a way around this is to link the Search Console. And to do that, you just simply navigate to Tools, Linked Accounts, and then come on, Google, and then Search Console, which is down here. And then you would link. I'm already linked, so I'm not going to unlink. And lastly, Google recently gave us the option to allow call reporting to get set account-wide. This can be enabled by going back to account settings. So I'll take you there again. So this submenu, then settings, and then account settings. And then call reporting. So enabling it here will be enabled for your entire account. So it's a quick workaround for having to do that other option that I showed you when you start with each of your call extensions. All right, so that sums up everything Google Ads and concludes this webinar. If you have any questions, please start typing in. Jessica and I will answer. Jessica, do you have anything to add?
I guess one last thing worth adding, if you don't mind navigating through so I don't have to take over presenter, is that we have a full calendar of training events for you. Next week we have our workshops, which will be a week long. We'll meet for about 2 hours every day, and we'll start with an empty account, and by the end we'll have a fully built out contact center. So the first 3 days are available for all 3 plans. The 4th day, just go to the support hub and then live training schedule right there. The 4th day is going to be specific to the marketing plan, and the 5th day is specific to the contact center plan. So depending on what plan you're on, we have at least 3 days worth of classes for you. If you are on the contact center plan, I would recommend doing all 5. You will have access to all the features that we'll be covering on the 4th workshop. As you can see, we also have different trainings that we're doing each day. So if you're looking for any additional training, this is a part of the Fundamental series. We'll have our advanced webinar tomorrow, which will go over advanced features that we offer, such as call queues and geo routing. We have a spotlight webinar that we'll be doing at the end of the month, which is going to be highlighting our form reactor, as well as every week we have office hours for our API, which is just like teacher office hours. You can meet with our dev team and answer any questions that you have regarding our API. With that, we also have our office hours, which is a panel of experts, which is it is, I think at this next one, we have 3 members of our team. We have one from sales, client success, and our dev team who are going to be representing, and you can just come in and ask them any questions, and we'd be happy to answer them. So it's a really great resource for you. I don't see any questions coming in. So with that, thanks again for everyone's time today. This will be recorded and able to be accessed through our YouTube channel. And again, thank you so much and have a fantastic day.
Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.